Everybody has places that they feel comfortable being. I'm about to describe a few of those places that I feel most comfortable in. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Okay, everybody, like I said, this episode is about places that I feel very comfortable at. Considering this is episode number 228 consecutive, straight up, no add ons, no redoing episodes, no what they call remixes or stuff like that. No, just 228 weekly episodes, new every time. I feel very comfortable with the fact that I'm able to sustain that sort of content for this amount of time. Going on, whew, man, 4 years. Feel pretty good about that. Feel pretty good about it. Or I should say comfortable. That's what this episode is about. Being comfortable. Much like the last several episodes, I've put myself on video where usually I like to have one of my paintings as the background for the video. And don't get me wrong, I have a few paintings that I specifically want to use for backgrounds, and I'm going to probably do that in the next few episodes, but especially for this episode about being comfortable, again, it's nice to have the comfortable surroundings around me. You know, the leather reclining couch I'm sitting in right here, just comfortable as can be. I feel like that little bug in a rug, just all comfortable. Can't get any warmer than that, right? But truthfully, I'm about to bring up some places that are slightly nostalgic, some that I haven't been to in a while, some I haven't been to in a long while. And I'm also going to go to a place that probably is extremely comfortable for me to be at, but it's not necessarily a place that I want to go to on a regular basis, even though for a long time I did. And I'm slowly getting myself back into that point where I'm going back to it. Just because it's a place that you've been doesn't mean it's a place that you're not comfortable in, if you know what I mean. But truthfully, I am extremely comfortable in that spot. Also, if time permits, I may add another place that I'm extremely comfortable going to and would not have any problem going back to, with the exception of the fact that it's not a comfortable place to be. Again, just because a place is, you feel comfortable going to a place, doesn't necessarily mean it's a comfortable place to be. And that's a simple fact, but time permitting, I'll decide whether or not I go there or not. We'll see. But as for now, it's time to fill in the blanks. The question for the fill in the blank this episode is very, very simple. Do I feel any concern for the 49ers after their Week 4 loss? The answer is no. That blank, wide open, 2 letters, no. Reason for it? Well, you have to break the season down into quarters, as they like to say. Even though there's 17 weeks now, you still give it 4 quarters, and then you have that one extra game. I can certainly say that going the first quarter of the season, 3-1, you can't ask for a lot better than that. Sure, the Eagles were 4-0, but guess what? If a team is somehow able to go 3-1 every quarter of the season, and then that last game is a toss-up, hey, you win that game, now all of a sudden, you're 13-4. You lose that game, you're 12-5, you're still in really good playoff position. Nothing to worry about. The 49ers had lost Brock Purdy for a couple weeks. George Kittle is going to be out until like week 6 or 7. Brandon Ayuk, after his torn ACL from last year, is finally going to be able to get back on the field sometime around week 8 or 9. So They also are considering some serious trades at the trade deadline in order to shore up that defensive end spot where Bosa, who is out for the season, is going to be a good thing to get their hands on. Now, I'm going to just put the name out there because I want that out there. Trey Hendrickson, Cincinnati Bengals. If they get him and they can sign him for a little bit longer, now you have Bosa, Hendrickson, and then you've got Mikael Williams, who is a great rookie that they just drafted. He's looking really good. You put those guys in a rotation, and that defensive line with Huff and Matos, Collins they got now, defensive tackle. They have a pretty solid defensive line, even if they don't show their full potential this year. If they make that trade for Hendricks, next year they're going to be an impenetrable wall of just vicious, pressuring, pass rushing monsters that are going to be a problem. That's going to make that back end of the defense with Malik Mustafa and Green and Adamador Lenore, they're going to look pretty good. And when you have that field general in the middle, Fred Warner, the cement that puts those brick walls together, and they're going to have a strong, stout defense for a couple of years if they can get all that stuff together. So, am I worried about them? No, they are going to be just fine, I believe. And I think it's now time for the main event. Bell's about to ring. Let's see. Places I feel most comfortable. Let's discuss what comfortable means realistically. If you're in a place that you're comfortable in, it means that you feel a sense of just relief, relaxation, just without question, you belong there and everything is right with where you are. That's a place that I would consider comfortable. Now, the first place that I'm going to bring up is going to be, let's see. Let's start with where do we go first? I think we'll go with, we'll start with this out of order as far as time goes, but one of the places I feel most comfortable is the boardwalk at Seaside. Now, in my early to middle 20s, I frequented that boardwalk a lot. And not just when most people would think. I mean, a lot of the people who I know are from the Philadelphia area now. You would think, it's summertime, you go down to the shore, as they would say. Nah. When I was living down there, I told people very frequently when I was working at Wawa and when I was going to, of all things, what a weird and awful name to have, Ocean County College. You're right there by the ocean, of course. It's really close to Seaside at that, if you go to that school. And there would be many a times when I would make the decision, am I going to go to class today, especially when it got to May, or am I going to go to the beach? And once in a while, I actually went to the beach instead of going to class. Then there was the times when I was working at Wawa and when I was working at ShopRite. The question would become, am I going to go to work or am I going to go to the beach? And most of the time, when I was at ShopRite, it was usually just go to work, go to work, go to work. But then when I got to Wawa, it really became hard. And truthfully, most of the time, I was able to talk myself out of going to the beach because I would just go after work, which is the beautiful part about living in that general area of Manchester, Toms River, any of those spots, because it's only 13 miles straight down Route 72, not Route 72, Route 37 to get to Seaside. That's all it is. 13 miles, straight stretch, and you're there. And at night, certain times you go around, I don't know, 11:30, and there is not a whole lot of traffic because most of the people who are going to be there have left and have already gotten there. Other people who, like the families and kids and stuff like that, they're already gone. And then there's that window when people start getting ready to go to the clubs that they haven't gone out there yet. So there's a nice, easy drive to get there at night around 11:30, 12 o'clock, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's really neat when you go there at night. I mean, it's still warm, especially during the summertime, and they still make pizza. And of course, that's one of the other beautiful parts about it. When I would go during the winter, guess what? My favorite pizza place, Three Brothers from Italy, was always open all year long. Whereas sometimes some pizza places on Seaside, they do close for the winter season, but Three Brothers is open all year long, and you can go. You can go there anytime you want up until I think they close like 9 or 10 in the winter. I think it's a little bit later during the summertime, but I'd go there after work at Wawa when I'd be like, it's real nice. I'm just going to go to work, and I would just go to Seaside afterwards. Walk around, walk the boardwalk. It's always pretty cool. Every once in a while, step on the beach. But I will say this, don't go swimming at night. You can't necessarily see the shoreline again if you go too far out, and you could get lost. Public service announcement. Don't go swimming in the ocean at night. I figured I better add that. Just because. And on that note, talking about going to Seaside in the winter and going there at night, there is something that I can't really explain. I've said it to a bunch of people who I know that I've suggested that they should do this if they got an opportunity, that they really, really need to go to the beach at the Jersey Shore, particularly my favorite one, Seaside, at night in the winter. And when I say winter, I mean like winter in January, February, somewhere in that neighborhood when it's really, really cold. And if you're fortunate and the moon is out, there's just something that I can't explain, but it's special. It really, really is special. And if you've never done it, I strongly recommend that you do it at least once. Even if you're just one of those people who are who frequent Atlantic City, because maybe you want to go to the casinos. Still, that's an even better excuse. You've got a hotel room probably if you're going to stick around for the night. You need to go to the beach at night. And it's just, there's something in the winter. There's just something about it that is, it's different. It really is different. You got to try it at least once. It's I can't explain it. I've told a bunch of people that, and it's like, they ask them, so what's so special about it? Yeah, it's cold, yeah, a little bit, but there's just something about it that you can only experience when you're there, and I can't explain it any better than that. You just got to go ahead and do it. Another thing about the beach when you're there at night, usually there's not going to be too many people there, so you can really take it in, which makes it even that much more special. I personally believe. Now, the next place that I'm going to talk about is the track at Southern Regional High School in Manahawkin, where I went for, well, high school. And in fact, I went to middle school there as well. I had left Barnegat, which I'm going to talk about a little bit after this, and went to live in a little town called Mayetta, which was just outside of Manahawkin, but it's still part of the area that Southern Regional at the time, and I don't know if it still is, probably gotta be part of their the area for the to be able to go to their district. And one of the things that made me feel extraordinarily comfortable was the track. Now, granted, the track is surrounding the football field, so I was able to be in that area quite a bit between my freshman year and, in fact, even 7th and 8th grade, because during those very same years, we had our track meets at the high school track. And there was always something about that track that always just felt comfortable. Like, I enjoyed being there. The teammates and friends that I made at that time, the competition that I had against opponents that were sometimes better than me, sometimes not. I loved every second of it. And there were some specific areas of this track at the Southern Regional Stadium that I used to love. And those places were, obviously, since I was a shot putter and discus thrower specifically, I had this routine. And I even started this routine, funny enough, when I was in 7th grade. And I did it all the way up through into my senior year of high school. And it was, I would walk up to the top of the stadium's, the top level of the bleachers, and I would stand there and I would just look down at the field. Now, how is this interesting? Well, because first of all, the locker rooms at Southern, moving up into the field itself, you had to sort of walk up a little bit of a hill, and then there was a bit of a plateau, and then you had to walk up another hill in order to get to the stadium itself. And so the stadium sat up on a hill. So when you got on top of the top bleachers of the hill, you were significantly high up when you think about it. And you could look down, look around, and I would do that before every single home meet. And then, of course, I would also do that when I went to away teams. I would go to their stadium top, and I'd walk up to the top, and I would look down, and that was just my thing that I would do. But it was so much more special when it was at home at Southern. It really was. Then there was, of course, the actual shot put circle, which was now the same level as the football field itself, just on the outside of the fence. And one of my favorite things to do in both the shot put and the discus circle was I would be so comfortable in that area that I just enjoyed being there so much. The first thing that I did was I would sit down in the middle of the throwing circle, and I would sometimes stretch, but for the most part, it would just be sitting there, essentially saying to my teammates and to my opponents, this is my world. This is my throne that I'm sitting upon in the middle of the shot put circle or in the middle of the discus circle. And when it was at Southern, this is absolutely my home circle. This is mine. Enter at your own risk. You're not beating me here. And a lot of times I was successful, but of course there were times when I wasn't, but still I enjoyed being in the middle of my shot put circle. Then, of course, there was the place that I called the top of the world. Now, I already made mention that the stadium was already up a couple of hills in order to get to it. Now, for safety's sake, a lot of times schools would have a place where when you would throw the shot put, and it would be off from everywhere else. Sometimes they had it in the middle of the football field or soccer field at the time. But at Southern, the shot put and discus area was even beyond, or the discus rather, and the javelin were even beyond where the shot put was. You had to go through yet another fence through the softball field, and you had to kind of walk up yet another little hill. And that is what I call the top of the world, because that hill actually was up higher than the top spot of the stadium. So from there, you were literally as high up as you could get as far as the hills go, and you could see most of the campus of the school from that spot because you're actually up that high because you had to go up that many hills. And boy, I have to admit, even though people would have freshmen carry their stuff, I was never the person to want the freshmen to carry my shot put or discus because, for no other reason, I don't want them to make the mistake of forgetting it. So I always carried my own stuff, which of course made it a little tricky when I had to drag that stuff up all those hills in order to get to the spot where I was throwing at. Especially when it came to the discuses, I had to bring them all the way up to the top of the world. Now, that was one of my favorite spots because not only was it really high and I still was very comfortable being in that environment, I was able to mark that discus circle in a very interesting way because they had at one point a fenced in area, a cage to stop the discuses if they were thrown off kilter so they wouldn't kill anybody standing outside. Now, I think it was my sophomore year or junior year. I think it was my sophomore year. They went and they changed the cage. They got rid of the cage and they moved towards some mesh netting. And the mesh netting had these metal poles on the side of it. Now, when you're right-handed and you release a discus, it's going to go towards the right. Now, when I was off with one of my throws, I would hit that pole and I would hit it hard. And I don't know what it looks like now, but I guarantee you that for several years, I put the biggest dent in that pole because my release was so strong and I hit that pole so hard. And sometimes I hit it a bunch of times when you started getting tired and letting it go too early. Clang, clang, clang. It was crazy. But that track at Southern Regional was one of my most comfortable places to be. And being at that top of the world spot, man, it was my favorite place for a long time. It really was. I enjoyed being there for all the track meets, especially in my senior year, because it turned out that every year when I was going there, the Ocean County Championship tournament, which was the first in the series of tournaments that was going on before the end of the season, we got to the States. Southern was chosen as, at the time, as the place, the Ocean County Championship, because we had a really good track at the time. It was strong, everything was great. And it was also in rotation for the second tournament of the year, which was a little bigger, called the Shore Conference, where both the Ocean County and Monmouth County teams would compete for the championship, and then there was the state championship. Now, the Ocean County, the Shore Conference, which was Ocean and Monmouth County teams, that tournament was split between two schools, and one of those schools was Southern, and the other school was usually, I can't remember where it was. Was it actually Monmouth High School? That sounds right, but that was also, at this point, we're talking almost 29 years ago. And at this point in 2025, it would have been 30 years since the Shore Conference tournament was held at Southern. My last time having a home Shore Conference tournament, where of course the Ocean County Championship was always at home at Southern. So I loved every second of that. And to have actually placed in the medals in my senior year at my home stadium, that felt good. That felt real good. But now, moving on to another place that felt very, very comfortable to me for a long, long time, it would have to be, well, my origin story place, if that makes any sense. Remember, I told you I'd come back to Barnegat? Well, that was where my origin story begins. The little town, which has now expanded to becoming a much bigger town, of Barnegat, New Jersey. When I went there originally, when I lived there originally, I should say, they had 3 elementary schools, one that had a middle school, and then those children would then transition to Southern Regional. Before I left in 6th grade, before I left in 7th grade, I went to Mayetta. Barnegat had just begun to open up a new middle school, which still transitioned to Southern Regional. And now it's been maybe, I don't know, probably around 20 years now, give or take. Maybe a few more, a few less, that Barnegat has their own high school now. So those students do not go to Southern anymore. But when I was living in Barnegat, we'll just use grade school numbers because those just make it a little simpler. Between the ages of kindergarten and 6th grade, I lived on a street in Barnegat called Gunning River Road. Now, this street was a throughway between a couple of major roads. Route 9, which is a road that literally goes from the top of New Jersey all the way to the bottom. You could literally drive that road that length of the entire New Jersey, and Gunning River Road would be right there, and you could turn there and get there, and you go all the way across most of the town to the middle of Barnegat to I want to say it was Bay Ave on the other side, which would lead you to Route 72, which would take you to Long Beach Island. But ultimately, that stretch of Gunning River Road, there was a portion of it from the Route 9 side, moving up till about midway through the Barnegat, that Gunning River Road was essentially my family's street. I can't stress it enough. It was my family's street. You know, some people will go, that's the house where we grew up. That would not necessarily be the entirety of the case for Gunning River Road for me. That's the street that my family lived on. And I mean the street my family lived on. We could start with the fact that on that street there was a house, which is no longer in the family, that was owned by my great grandmother and her husband. And they owned a lot of that land in that area, to the point where they had enough where they actually gave a piece of land to all 4 of their children. There's a piece that was given to my grandmother, her youngest brother, her next youngest brother, and then her sister. They all had land and built a house on that area, on that street. So there was literally 1, 2, 3, 4 houses on that road that were owned by my family. Now, besides that, there was maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 other houses. Now, I wasn't even counting my great grandmother's house, so technically we had 5 houses on that street. We're not even talking about the block; we're talking about the whole street. Then, of course, my Uncle Willie, who is my mother's brother, bought a nice little chunk of land on that same street where he lives to this day. And from his house across the street there was where his uncle, my grandmother's brother, had a house. So those two houses that were across the street from each other were my Uncle Willie and my Uncle Bill's house. And then you'd move down, and then there was a house that my Aunt Daisy, my grandmother's sister, owned. But then she actually took over their mother's house because she was the oldest of the siblings. Next to her house was a house that is now owned by some, I don't know if she's still there. It's been so long, I haven't checked in with her. It's a nice lady. Her name was Kate Blackwell, and her family lived there. But prior to that, that house belonged to my Uncle Calvin, who was my grandmother's youngest brother. And then next to that house was my grandmother's house. And then there was the church directly next to my grandmother's house. And that church, of course, is extremely significant because my grandparents, my grandmother, and all of her siblings were actually the first children at the church, because my great-grandfather was a deacon who was there when the church was established. That church is Mount Zion Baptist Church. And it was right there on Gunny River Road with all these other houses. So to say that I was familiar and comfortable with all of that in that entire stretch is the ultimate understatement. As a kid, I knew every square centimeter, not even every square inch, every square mile, I knew every square centimeter of Gunny River Road from the beginning of Route 9 all the way down to my uncle's house. And some of the streets, and obviously plenty of the streets in between, but specifically that spot, that was my home base. I ran through the woods and knew every single square centimeter of that area. I played outside at my grandmother's house where I lived with my mother, and I played at the church. I had my cousins who were up and down the street. There was literally no aspect, and I do stress that, there was no aspect of Gunny River Road that I did not know. And there was a point in time where there were plenty of dogs. Everybody had a dog, and that was a day in the days where everybody's dog was living outside. Quite literally, if somebody would be, I guess you could say, a stranger to Gunny River Road with all the kids that were there, those dogs would bark, and those dogs would get loose, and they would not allow anybody to do anything to any of those kids that were in that area. It was actually pretty interesting. I'm not a dog person. I'm really a cat person, but at that time I had my big husky, what was he? Husky Shepherd mix. And his name was Spike. Big white dog. And boy, I'm telling you, he and all the other dogs would communicate. You hear him barking back and forth. And every once in a while, one of them would get loose. And the coolest part about it was, when the dog would get loose, it would simply make the rounds. It was almost like they coordinated it with each other, all these dogs. And they said, hey, I'll get loose this time, and I'll go see you, and then I'll go see you, and then I'll go see you, and I'll go see you, and I'll relay any messages that you have. It was really quite fascinating, because they would get loose, and they would go, and they would visit the other dogs, and then they would come back home. It was really, really fascinating. I can't even begin to tell you how weird that was, but it was just what it was. And those dogs actually helped make Gunny River Road a lot more comfortable for me. Like I said, during that time, that was one of the aspects of Gunny River Road that was extremely interesting. It's one of those things where some kids get really scared at night moving around, and trust me, it was a little town that didn't have a whole lot of traffic lights, and there was none on that street, obviously. Until now, there are a few on both ends, but the actual street lights, there was a couple, but being in that fairly wooded area, knowing that you knew all the adults that were there, and for me, it was safe to say that 70% of the people who were there related to me for quite a while. There was never any fear of anything outside at night because you knew everybody. It certainly didn't help that to not be afraid of anything, knowing that my uncle actually worked overnight as a police officer, and my grandmother's brother was a fireman, and my aunt, who was married to my uncle, and my grandmother's sister-in-law were both in the healthcare field. My aunt was a nurse, and the other one was a home care health aide. There was an Uncle Bill. He was a fireman. I mean, there was literally no situation or scenario that you could feel uncomfortable with on that road if you were me or any of the kids over there. And truthfully, that was absolutely one of the most comfortable places that I've ever been in my entire life. So comfortable, like I said, I would feel as confident as you could possibly believe when I was in, let's say, 5th grade, 4th grade. I'd go outside and stand out there for hours and wouldn't even think about it. Of course, that is unless I had just got done watching Robert Stack on Unsolved Mysteries talking about how aliens abducted people. And of course, that show came on Wednesday, and I will have to admit, there were some pretty sketchy times when, after just watching that, I had to go take out the trash after watching Robert Stack talk about how aliens just abducted people. And of course, here I go at night in the middle of this rather rural, nobody around area, and the sky was all clear and you couldn't see much. And it's like, oh, this is a perfect place for aliens to show up. They're not going to have to worry about anybody noticing anything that they do. But still, that was a fun time, and it was a fun place to be. When it comes to growing up at a certain spot, Gunning River Road, I would never take that for granted. I enjoy it to this day, and like I said, my uncle, he still lives there, and truthfully, it's the most consistent house that I know. It's got the same phone number, it's the same place, same people. In fact, the only people who ever lived there was my uncle, because he actually had the house built. So realistically, Gunning River Road is definitely a place that is extremely comfortable for me. Another place that has become really comfortable, no longer a place that I'm going to visit on a regular basis or be there. It was my mother-in-law's house in Overbrook here in Philadelphia. Now, this house has a very unique distinction because I ended up moving quite a bit throughout my lifetime. A lot of different moves. And during those different moves, the one truth could be said. I never lived any one place more consistently longer than my mother-in-law's house in Overbrook. It was absolutely the longest place I had lived. Now, granted, I own this house that I'm in right now, and I'm expecting that I'm going to break that record from Overbrook in a couple of years. But prior to it, I had moved around to so many different places throughout my entire life, and I had finally gotten comfortable living in this house. Now, it was a comfort that had to grow. Now, admittedly, the situation for why we moved into that house was not the best. My mother-in-law had a stroke, and she ended up we tried to see if we could live in the house and sort of take care of her until we realized that her situation was at a point where we were not able to be able to do any more for her personally, between us working and getting ready to start our family. We and the fact that her sickness after the stroke became so difficult because she had gotten some dementia, and she had lost really the use of her left side, and the amount of care that needed to be given to her versus the amount of care that we were able to give for her, it just didn't work. We tried it for a while. We tried it, and it got to the point where it just didn't work, and we had to do something different. I did a whole episode on my mother-in-law, Mrs. Davis. It's in the archives of Spotify, and her birthday actually just passed not too long ago. She would have been 80 years old this year had she lived. Wow. 80. Yep. She left us in, of course, that miserable year of 2020. Just one more thing to make 2020 a little bit more miserable than it had to be. And of course, I always had to leave that episode with the fact that it was even more to the point for me because she passed on my birthday in 2020. So I will never forget the day that she passed. Never. At all. It's impossible for me because it was my birthday. I could not forget that. But the house that she had, it had a basement that I pretty much used as my sort of dwelling. I didn't go down there all the time, but it was where I had my cereal boxes, and they were well protected down there. I had gotten, it took me so long because, like I said, the feeling of why we were there, it was hard for maybe a year and a half. And then I started getting very, very comfortable with being there. And once I got myself super comfortable with being there, I didn't want to leave. But unfortunately, it worked out that there were a lot of repairs that needed to be made and a lot of band-aids that were put on the house that we were unaware of. And we started doing the best that we could. We put a ton of money into it to try to maintain it. And I'll have to admit, my wife was ready to leave probably a whole 3 years before I was even considering it. I was pushing back. No, we can't leave, because I had gotten so comfortable in the place until finally it broke me. And the situation was, we had fixed the pipes a few times. I personally had to do a little bit of work in the garage, which was a little crazy because I am not a plumber, and I had to figure out something, and it worked for a little while, and then we had to get a plumber. And we had an issue where there was a massive problem where the water had come through the roof, through the ceiling, and it was terrible. And we got that fixed and had the entire living room redone and painted different rooms and did a lot of work. And then it happened one day. I was on my way to work, and the water pipes blew out again, and it just water all over everywhere. It looked like a waterfall. And it was at that moment that I knew that, we need to abandon ship. And we did. But that didn't make it any easier. I still was super comfortable in that house all the way up until the very end, when I locked the door for the last time before we sold it. And boy, it took me a long time to get used to it, but when I did, I was in it for the long haul, and I'm still, to this day, remember that house very, very fondly and how much time I spent in it. Oh boy, this is actually going pretty well. I'm trying to see if I'm going to skip one because I'm actually moving time is actually going a little bit different. In fact, I'll do these two, and if I have enough time, I'll circle back to the other one. Because I think I do want to add that spot. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I didn't think about it until I was in the middle of the open. But another place that I feel very comfortable with, very comfortable in, and it's a place that is not comfortable to be in, but I feel comfortable in prison. It sounds terrible to say that, but yes, I am comfortable walking the halls of a prison. Now, there is a certainty that I have to, that's not even the right word. You don't want to be, when I'm saying comfortable, that might not even be the right word because you don't want to be, you don't want to, I can't, the word is escaping me right now. You don't want to be lackadaisical when you're walking through there. But I have enough to know that there were some officers who, when they started working in the jail, were very, very, very uncomfortable and timid. And those ones didn't make it. There has to be a point where you have a confidence when you're walking those halls of the prison where it's like, hey, you know what? I can do this. I'm not intimidated by anybody. And truthfully, that's what has to happen. You have to have that feeling where you can walk in there and not be afraid of anything, but you have to be aware of everything. So realistically, I'm comfortable walking through a prison. Like I could do it now. Granted, I'm in no shape to do it, to do the work. But if I was to just say, hey, would you want to go just do a walkthrough in a prison, go on the block? Yeah, no problem. I won't have any hesitation because I get it. I know how it works. I'm comfortable with that. There are people who wouldn't want to do a walkthrough in a prison if all the jail cells were locked. They just wouldn't feel good about it at all. I have that. Obviously, that's why I was able to work there for 5 years. And I certainly say that it takes a certain person to be able to work in a jail and to have that comfort level. Now, like I said, talking about being comfortable in the jail, there is a point where you don't want to feel like, okay, I'm going to put my feet up and just eat chips all day and drink soda and just be comfortable. But you absolutely don't want to be unaware of your surroundings because that's part of it. You have to understand that and being comfortable with, okay, anything can happen at any time. That is certainly something that you have to keep aware of. But truthfully, it is not a comfortable situation, and I get how people could not be comfortable walking through a jail. But that's all part of the job. You have to have that comfort and confidence level to do it. But yeah, that's how I knew that that was a job that I could do because I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid. I was like, okay, I can do this. When I walked through the door the first time inside the actual prison, what do they call it? The secure area where the inmates are. Another place that I could say that I feel very, very comfortable in is the gym. I'm no stranger to the gym since realistically, wholeheartedly, ninth grade, is when I started doing a lot of gym stuff. hmm That's when I started working out at the Southern Regional Weight Room in the high school, and I know my way around it. I feel like I can go to pretty much any gym and be perfectly comfortable being there. Not like the deer in headlights. Oh my goodness, what should I do? All this. No, no, no. I feel I have an overwhelming comfort level walking into the gym. I can go right in there. If somebody asks me a question, I could probably help them out with that question. I feel confident enough where I have a routine that I have in my mind that I want to do. In fact, before I got hurt, I started doing a series of training blocks because I really understood, and I say understand, that muscle confusion is a real thing. And the benefits of muscle confusion are really, really important, to the point where, yeah, it's one thing where you can do a set pattern of exercises and you're going to have a set amount of gains. Even with progressive overload, you're still going to have the gains, but they will slow down because your body eventually will get used to doing what it is you're doing. Muscle memory is a real thing. What ends up happening is your body gets so used to doing what you're doing that it doesn't necessarily all the time is going to react to what you're doing, and because of that, your gains as far as strength or even endurance, they slow down. So what you have to do is you have to mix it up. For me, I would do, like I said, I started doing training blocks at the end where I broke down my workouts into upper body front, upper body back, lower body, and um, compound work at the end. Prior to that, I would just be upper body front, upper body back, and legs. But I would break down all those things in a point where, in order to create the confusion, I would do 3 types of workouts in the midst of all those things. And those 3 types were high rep, moderate rep, and heavy rep. I know I'm getting into a little bit of workout stuff, but this is how comfortable I am with the gym stuff. My high rep was just that. If I couldn't do 15 or more reps, the weight was too heavy. Moderate, if I could do somewhere between 10 and 12, that's exactly where I wanted it. And when I started doing heavy stuff, I needed to be able to get somewhere between 6 and 8. If I could do more than 6 or 8, the weight was not heavy enough. And because of doing those different things, I would come up and I would have days where I would really shock the system, and I would say, okay, I'm going to do high reps with legs. And I would end up doing, like, with the leg press, I would do 200 reps. But it would be a lighter weight. But boy, at 200 reps with a light weight, it tore you up. Then I would do leg extensions and leg curls, and I'd do like 20, 25, really lightweight, but a lot of reps to the point where the burn was real. And then maybe I would do moderate for the chest in the front area, where I'd get to 14. And then when it would go to the back, I then would start doing some heavy stuff. And then I'd mix it up. I would do high rep back, moderate for the leg stuff, and then I would do, say, heavy for the back, the front. So I would mix it all around, and I'd create confusion so that the body didn't know what it was going to get into, and it never got a chance to get comfortable doing anything. Which, of course, is the weird part, your body not being comfortable, but I was comfortable in the gym. Always. For decades, I guess I could say. Now I'm an old guy. So it's been at least 47, 17, 30 years And of course, there was a lull in between, but even during that lull, I still had confidence going into the gym and comfort level being there. And that's really what it comes down to. And there was a point where it was like, yes, is it a place that I would aim to be all the time? I don't necessarily want to be in there. But guess what? It served a purpose. And because it served a purpose, that's why I went. And that's why I've subtly started to go back. And I'll explain that a little bit more a little later. But the comfort level that I have going to the gym is extremely high. And then, of course, I will go to the one last thing that I wanted to do, and of course, that is my office in the back. That is probably one of my favorite places in the world. It's a place where I store my stereo boxes, where I have my art, some of my paintings. I have my collectibles, my literal 2 walls of good and evil. I have one wall that has all of my Sith action figures from the Emperor, Darth Vader, General Grievous, Darth Maul, and then on the other side, across from them, I have many Jedi Knights. Of course, Mace Windu, Yoda, Anakin, Ahsoka. Yeah, I found an Ahsoka Tano, and that's one of my favorite ones. And I have my Money in the Bank briefcase hanging from the ceiling, of course, hanging there. I love going in there. It's a comfort zone beyond comfort. When I go out there, it's totally isolated. It's behind the fence, and the door is locked. There's only one way in, and you can't get in it from being inside the house. You have to walk outside to go to it, and that makes it more isolated. It's just, I love it. I love it. Truly one of my very favorite places. I couldn't ask for better. It was one of the number one selling points of the house for me, that I had that spot. I love it. But on that note, I think it's time to shut the door on the main event, and I'm going to ring the bell. Well, as a result of that, I'm going to go into the picks. Now, I am ahead of schedule again, so I'm going to tell you what happened in week 4 for me, give you a recap of week 5, which is what I'm getting ready to do, and then week 6, I'll go into that, how I think those are going to go. But week 4, I had the Vikings beating the Steelers, and I was absolutely wrong. The Steelers won 24-21. I thought that the Jaguars were going to lose to my 49ers, and I was again wrong. The Jaguars beat the 49ers 26-21. Ravens, Chiefs, I thought the Chiefs were still up against the ropes, and the Ravens, they couldn't be that bad, are they? Well, yeah, they were. 37 Chiefs, 20 Ravens. I'm really doing bad this week. Just the fact that I just told you 3 losses, that should tell you that I had a very bad week. And to cap it all off, the Cowboys and Packers, I had the Packers winning that game by 10, and I'm going to consider this one a loss because, well, nobody won. It was 40-40. Tie. So that's a loss. So the only one that I did win was the Texans versus the Titans, and I was way off on the score. I thought it was going to be a close game, but the Titans were going to lose. And the Titans did lose, but they got shut out 26-0. The only win I had in week 4. So I ended up going 1 of 4 in week 4, which made my season total so far 500, 10-10, and it's all because of just a terrible week in week 4. Now, to re-emphasize what I said in week 5, I have the 49ers and the Rams, and I expect the 49ers to bounce back and win that game. The Giants and the Saints in what was a loser bowl, I expect, of all things, I think the Saints could get their first win, and especially since Malik Neighbors is hurt, one of the best wide receivers in the league. I think that could definitely make the Saints pull that one off. Now, here's one that I'm actually going to change because Lamar Jackson being hurt, the team just not doing good at all. I'm going to change my score about the Ravens. I'm going to go 20-17. And I think that instead of the Ravens getting the win, the Texans are going to win. I'm changing that one. Bengals Lions. I expect the Bengals to get slaughtered. It's 35-17 to the Lions. Commanders and the Chargers. This one's a bit of a toss-up. I'm going to keep it the way it is. I'm still going to go Commanders. I'm going to go 30-17. What else? 30-27 Chargers in week 5. That's what I see. Now, I'm going to extend it to week 6 now. 49ers, I think they're going to edge out the Bucks, 20-17. The Rams, I think they're good enough to beat the Ravens, 30-21. Colts, they're definitely a pretty good team, which is a couple of mistakes they had lost last week. I think they're going to beat the Cardinals 24-20. Steelers over the Browns 20-10. And the Packers are going to just roll over the Bengals. I mean, I was really hoping that that Joe Burrow was going to be healthy, and because I think that would have been a game that the Bengals could have made a statement in. But they're not going to. Packers are going to beat them 35-10. So week 6, I have the 49ers beating the Bucks, the Rams beating the Ravens, the Colts beating the Cardinals, the Steelers beating the Browns, and the Packers beating the Bengals. And I really need week 5 and week 6 to hit because I got to get way over 500 after that terrible week I just had. Those are my picks. If I had to go with a spear of the week this week, I was having a hard time with it. And as a result of that, I think that's a positive thing. So, realistically, I don't have a spear of the week this week. There was nothing that was so horrible this week that was something so egregious that I personally felt that I wanted to spear somebody. So I'm going to go with it. No spear of the week. Tune in next week. There's probably going to be somebody to do something stupid to make me able to want to spear them. So never fear. And now it's time to shut down the show. One of my favorite but least favorite things to do because I like talking to you. But you can always communicate with me on Instagram at PhilipHenderson5102. Join us on the Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. Here, the show itself, which is at Phil the Lip on YouTube. We've got some subscribers going. Had a couple of new ones. I can say personally, I'm very proud of the fact that I've got 51. I wasn't even sure I was going to get 10. So realistically, I'm doing a lot better than I expected. But of course, I would certainly like to see about getting a few more. So definitely do me the favor. Subscribe to at Phil the Lip here on this YouTube channel. Words of wisdom this week. These are some of my favorite that I just thought about because of the type of show. Find that place that makes you feel comfortable, because once you do, only great things will happen to you. Find that place that makes you feel comfortable, because when you do, only good things will happen to you. And on that note, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.